Hi, welcome to Flutter Junction. In this article, we shall see how to use the block library to perform HTTP request and manage the state of the application. And this is how our final application shall be looking. When I restart it again, as you can see, we shall see the circular progress indicator when our data is being fetched from the server. And when the data is fetched, we are going to show these items into the list view. You can see here the circular progress indicator, and then we have our data loaded, and this is how our application shall be looking, and we are going to build this application using the block pattern, right? And for the block, first we need to find the mechanism to fetch the API from the server, and for that we create the repo first, so that we could create our method to get the data from the server. Now inside the library folder, I will zoom it. Okay, inside the library folder, we create the new folder named repo, and inside the new file named repositories.tar. Okay, this is our user repository, and you can see here we have the user URL from where we are going to get the data. Okay, first let's visit this URL. Here, this is our JSON data that we are going to fetch, and you can see here we are going to use this data and these items from the data. So for that we need to create the model, and okay, let's create the model and come back here, and here we create the new folder model, and then let's say user model dot. As you can see in this model, we have this data. We are going to focus the data on these items such as ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar. We are going to use these items into our application. As you can see here, we have ID, email, first name, last name, and avatar, and we have the constructor, and here we are returning the from JSON, and you can see here from the API we are going to get the data in the form of map. So we have created our map here, and we are returning these values. Okay, now let's go to back our repositories. As you can see here, and first we get the response, and then when the response is success, then we are decoding our body, and then we are accessing the data from our data tag from our API. You can see here this data from our API, and from this JSON we are going to get the object of the user, and then we are going to return the list from here, and we can do as follows. Let's import the user model. Okay, so what is here happening is, you can see first we get the JSON, and then we are getting these each of the items from this JSON, and then we are converting it into the object, and when this iteration completes, and then we are returning the list from here. So here we are going to return the future list of user model, because this is async. We are returning the future from here. Now we need to understand the block pattern and its architecture. First of all, we have the UI, and whenever our UI first connects to the block, and you can see here block has two items parameters, that is, first is event and other is state, and whenever the UI connects to the block, it triggers an event. You can say UI triggers an event, and whenever the event is triggered, then the it connects to the repository and make the request from the server, and then server returns with the data. And whenever the server returns with the data, and we have the to the block, and it gives the data to the block, and it triggers an event, and when the event is triggered, and it finds that we have the change in the data, that is state, and whenever the state changes, the UI knows. How? With the block pattern or from our block. First, UI connects with the block, triggers an event, then it connects to the repository, makes the API request from our endpoint, and then the server returns the data and again triggers the event. And whenever the data is changed, then our UI knows. How? With the block pattern. So here we create new folder and name blocks, and then the new file name app states.dart. Here we have created the first state, and if you are coming from GetX or other state management libraries such as provider or GetX, and you may be confused of what it is. So in block we need to have the abstract class created that extends the equitable to create the state. So in GetX, like you can make it reactive just like x dot obvious, and your variable becomes reactive, but in block it is not working like that. And for changing the state, let's say from like in GetX, from bool loading equals true to loading equals false. So in GetX you can change the state of loading just like this, but in block you need to create a class to change this loading value to from true to false. For that, for each state we need to create the class in block pattern. So in block you need to keep in mind that every state needs to be in class, and you can see here we have the abstract class and the user state, and we have the new file here. Okay, and the user state extends the equatable, and this equatable is used to check whether our variables data contains the same value or not. That means whenever the data on the variables are same, we are not going to draw our UI, but whenever the data changes in the variable, we are going to update our UI. So equitable confirms that the variables does not contain the same value, and this user state abstract class doesn't have to have body. So to check whether our the state doesn't contain the same variables, the variables of our state doesn't contains the same value, we extend with the equitable. Okay, coming down here, user loading state, we are extending with the user state, this abstract class. So in this application, we need to have 3 states, and the first one is okay, data loading state. That means our data is being loaded from the server and it is not completed. Another can be okay, data loaded state. That means our data is loaded from the server, this repository. Our data is loaded onto this repository. And then the other can be data loading error state. That means our data cannot be loaded from the server. That means our data, when fetching the data, we have the error. And first we work with this, and then we on moving on continuously we are going to make this state also. And you can see here this equitable contains the get prop methods. These get props come from the equitable, and because we have extended this equitable on our abstract class, and the abstract class is extended by our loading state, we have the access to this get props method, get props, these props, and we need to override this get props, and we can set the data to null. That means this loading state doesn't need to have the data, that's why it is empty, and it is null because we are not going to pass any data in this state. This is the first step of the block pattern, that is we have already created the state. Now we need to create the event. So like steps in block, you need to create the class for each event, and for that inside blocks we create the new file app events dot start. Like the state, you can see we have the abstract class that extends the equitable, and then we have the constructor, and then we have the event that extend this user event, and we have extended the equitable, and we need to override our props. And you can see here we have this immutable. This means we don't want to change the data in this event whenever our changes happens once the data is loaded. That means after creating this class, this user event class, we are not going to change the properties of this class. That's why we are using this immutable. Like in the app state also we are using this immutable. The use of immutable is same in this app state also. Okay, let's back to events again. Now after creating the state and the events, we need to find the mechanism or method so that we could create we could connect this app and the events and the state. So you can see here, to connect these states and the events, now we can use the block. So we create the new class so that we can inject these states and these events into the block, and so that we can get these state and events in the UI. So here we create the app block into the blocks, app underscore blocks dot start, and here we create our app block. Here we have created the user block, and you can name it as per your need, and then it extends the block which takes the event and the state. In our case it is the user event that we have created earlier, and then the app state we have already created this user state. Okay, and then this block is coming from the block library, and then we have the constructor here, user block, and which takes the user repository, and we are going to call this user block from our UI. After calling from this UI, we are injecting this value to our block. So after this constructor, we have the super constructor, and we pass the initial state to this super constructor, and after that we have this on that takes the event, and then after uh, emitting, after the event is created, then we this event emits the state, that is user loading state. This event is used to make something work or to do something, and after when this user load user event is created and event is triggered, then it says, hey, emit the state, and in our case this is user loading state. Now to trigger this event and to get this state, we need to go to our main.dart file here. Okay, first let's create the new file named homepage.dart, and then we do some cleaning here. And this homepage, we don't need this. And then inside the homepage we create the stateless widget and name it homepage, and then we import it into our main.dart file. Okay, we have. Right, now let's move to our homepage. So this is homepage. As you can see here, the multi-block provider, and multi-block provider comes from the block, and with this we can inject multiple providers into our class to the child. That means here you can see block provider. Block provider is just like in getx get.put, and this block provider consists of create. Here we inject our user block into the child. You can see here with the user repository where our data is located. And after the block provider, you can see here the data is unloaded only once, and then we inject the value from here, value from user repository to our child, in our case that is scaffold. Okay, after that, coming down to block body, you can find the block provider, same like in getx it is like get.put, and with the create it takes the context, and then our block with our user repository where our data resides, and then with the cascading operator we then add our event. So what happens when triggering this event, when the block is created, it goes to our this block, and then it gets the event, and then it emits our user loading state. Again, let's go to home page. Whenever our provider is this user block is created, and this you can see here we have added the event, and whenever this event is triggered and it goes to our block, and from the block you can see here this event, and then our user loading state would be emitted. Okay, after that, coming down, you can see here block builder which takes the block and the state, and now this the state, you can see here this okay, this is event, right? Okay. Okay, this user state and these repositories would be available into our home page with this block builder, and you can check, right, to check the state. If state is user loading state, you can get the state here. Check state is user loading state, we are going to return our circular child indicator. That means we have the loading indicator on our application. Okay, now let's run this and check whether it is working or not. As you can see here, the circular progress bar is indicating indicator is loading infinitely. That means our app is running, and congratulations, you have now just created the first state in the block architecture. So what is happening here is, whenever this event is triggered, it is coming to the app blocks, and whenever app block find this event, load user event, and then it emitted the user loading state, then into our home page. After getting the state with this block builder, we are checking if state is user loading state, and when it finds that the user state is user loading state, and we are getting the circular progress indicator here. So you can see here our indicator is moving on forever. Now after this state, now we want to perform something, so we are going to perform this state, that is the app blocks. Okay, now let's print this is a event, and then run it again. As you can see here, after the loading state is completed and we have this is a event triggered. So now we need to find a way to stop this event state. So how can we change the event? As you can see here, into the state we have only the loading state. So now we create the other class for whenever our data is loaded. So let's copy this and then create the new state named user loaded state. So whenever we create a state, so we need to go to the app blocks to emit that state. So after that, let's emit user loaded state. Okay, now first our state would be user loading state, and then it prints an event, and then the user loaded state. And now when you go to the home page, and we have checked here only the user loaded state, and now let's run it, and we can see the very different result from now. You can see here we have got the circle progress indicator, and then we printed the event, and now the progress indicator is gone because we haven't returned anything on this user loaded state. It came first here and this from here, and it showed the circular progress indicator, and then after that it printed the event, and after that it emitted the user loaded state. But here we haven't returned anything, or it doesn't have any data here. So this means we can perform a lot of tasks between these events. Between loading state and the loaded state, we can perform the activities so that we can get the data from our this repository. Whenever we get the data, we are going to emit our loaded state, this user loaded state. So before that, let's check if our loaded state is working or not. If state is user loaded state, we return center child of text, bingo, data loaded, and then we run it again. Okay, let's make it const. Right, now we restart it again, and it may be very fast. We cannot see the circle progress indicator, but you can see here, bingo, the data is loaded. That means our user loaded state is working. Right, now let's get back to our block and then get the data from the repository. And for that, here we have the try catch, and now here we are getting the data from this repository. From this repository, we are calling this get API, and then we are returning the list of users from here, and from the block we are getting these users, and then we are emitting the user loaded state. Now to get this user available to our home page, right, to get this data available to our UI, we need to pass this data to our state. So you can get error here because we don't have any data. So here in user loaded state, we pass the list of user model. And let's say users. Of course, we need to import this. Let's make it final. And then we pass this user to our props. Right. Showing the error here. Must be initialized. Okay, let's make it nullable. Oh, okay. We need to create the constructor here and pass our users here. Right, and the user should be gone now. And then close this. Okay. So what actually here we are doing is, whenever we get the data from the repositories, our block gets the data in the after loading state. We now call the data from the repositories. Now after the repositories and the data is filled into these users, and then we emit our user loaded state with the users that is coming from our server, so it can be available to our UI. Right, now okay, again now whenever we don't get the data from server, or we get any problems, we emit the new state. Let's say user error state, and then we pass the exception in string, and it is showing error because we don't have the user error state. Let's go back to the state and then create the new state named user error state. And here we are not going to have the list data type. We have the string data type, and then the error, and then this should be, let's paste it here, and then error state, copy this and paste it here, and the error should be gone now. Okay, so whenever our repository and whenever calling the API we got the error, we are loading this state, and then our block emits the user error state from here, app blocs. Right, now let's get back to our home page and then get the data here and return our data in the list. And to get the data from the state, we have the list of user model, user list, and then we can get the data from the state and then the users. You can see here the users. From here we can get the data from the repositories is written from the block. Okay, and after getting the data, setting the data, we have the list builder with the item count, the user list of length, and then we have the user list and first name and last name here, and the email and the background image circular avatar. Okay, now let's restart it again, and then we have our data loaded onto our application. Right, now to emit the error state, okay, let's close it. Now we have successfully created the check the loading state, loaded state, and now for the error state. For that, similarly, state is user error state. We return in the center child text, let's say error, and then okay, it should const, and right, and the error should come now. Okay, whenever our user error state is triggered, we are going to return this text error here. So to check the error, let's go back to our repository, and then okay, let's change the endpoint. Let's delete this and run it again. Okay, here we have the circle progress indicator and then the error, because we don't get the endpoint to get the data from, so we are getting the error. So you can play around with this application and create the new page on clicking this list view. Okay, let's restart it again. It should work now, and it is working now. Okay, so now you can play around with this application, and you can get this data on clicking and go to the next page. You can play on your own, and if you have any queries regarding this tutorial, you can ping me and comment. And if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment and share it with your friends. And if you haven't subscribed the channel and to get notified on upcoming videos, you can press the bell icon and the subscribe button. Thank you. Happy coding.